So when I have a question, I actually get my questions answered, and they're answered right away. And that's really helpful because now as I'm starting to get more serious into my training, like I'm noticing little quirks with my body, like, okay, this left hip is tight. How do I work on that? Oh, here's mobility exercises to help with that. Oh, I'm not sure how many calories I should eat. Oh, talk to Elizabeth, so it feels more supportive by...
All right, guys. I would say welcome back, but really it's welcome back to me. So it's a little awkward.
It is welcome back to you.
Welcome back to me. I am back from South Africa and London.
What time is it in South Africa? And do we want to play that game?
No. It is,
we don't want to play
It is
the crazy time zone
2
game
in the morning, I believe.
Africa.
Yeah. You're gonna slowly see me just start to face plant.
Yeah.
Like that. But I'm back as of last night. Happy to be back.
Dude, it's good to have you back.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, for those of you guys who watched last week, Holly was great.
Yes. I saw a little bit of
she
that.
She killed it.
Yeah.
Always fun to have her on. Talk about her 50-mile.
You got a little smoothie stuck up in there in your
the flavor saver.
Guys, we're back, and I tell you what, I'm really glad to be back and have my smoothies.
Yeah.
I miss them.
Did you have smoothies in South Africa?
In Matt's office, so a friend of mine who Nate knows well as well, has a company down in South Africa, and that's why I was there.
Yeah.
Did a little advising. You like how I still have the tag on my hat? And they have a barista who serves fresh green squeezed juice all day. And so soon that we need to have that as well.
Yeah.
And you have so
that.
few of these, I didn't know if you're going to have to give this away to one of our team members later, or do I get one?
You do get one.
Okay, great. This is going to be mine.
I know. I have mine. Our
cracking
new hats,
the seal here.
Our new hats, we unveiled them last week, and so many of them are spoken for.
Like you said, unveiled.
I am nervous. We're gonna run out.
Well, my parents are coming next week. They're definitely gonna want some. So
we'll make sure.
Guys, it came out so well though. Check this out.
Isn't it great?
I'm very happy with this. Yeah.
Little leather tag.
Yeah, look at me. I'm full branded today.
Full brand. Well, if Craig is happy, so am I. Guys, we have a great show today.
I know. I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna be great.
Yeah. Alex Hutchinson is an author and journalist. He has written the Sweat Science column for Runner's World for Forever, which you can now find over at Outside Magazine. And he just wrote this great book called Endure. I love the title, The Curiously Elastic Limits of Human Performance.
Love it.
That came out earlier in this year, and I remember reading it earlier in the year, and I had my fanboy moment at the New York City Marathon this year because I got to see him and Nick Thompson speak. And Nick Thompson is a writer for Wired.
Okay.
And both Nick and Alex got insider access to Nike's Breaking 2 project.
Right.
The whole project for running under the 2-hour marathon. So it was super fun to listen to him speak. I got a little, fanboy moment. I came up hat in hand.
Yeah.
Hi, Alex. How are you? And chat with him a little bit. Will you be on our show, please? And of course, he was very generous to come on. So we'll have him on in about 10 minutes or so. But guys, great questions on training. I've been kind of noodling on this whole mental toughness thing.
Mm-hmm.
What does that even mean?
I definitely feel like I've lost a step in my mental toughness when I race.
Yeah.
Because I'm not racing as often.
I mean, I've noticed a slip.
It's funny. You better hope that I don't get it back. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, man.
No, I definitely think that I think of my mental fortitude when I'm racing is something that it's like everything else. You have to use it. And now it's being applied to the run experience and is getting driven into my keyboard.
I know,
as
right?
opposed to elsewhere.
It is going elsewhere. Let's say hi to the good people of the internet.
Carrie Hale is asking, are the hats sold out already?
They aren't yet.
They aren't?
No, they're not yet. We probably have maybe 20 to sell.
Okay. All right.
And I'm being a little conservative. We probably have a little bit more, but if everyone
once you take them out for like my parents will steal stuff from us when they come to visit, there's gonna be less.
Exactly. So if you guys, I just posted a link in there. If you want to get a hat, I would get one.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Yeah. There's a little gear store. You could also get our other style hat if you like that too.
We are slowly but surely trying to learn the game of having merchandise for you guys.
I know. I know.
I hate it. but Nate likes it, and so we're doing it.
The gear thing is so fun. I think the hard part for us was, where do we do it? Who has it? Jessica has decided to be, lovely Jessica, our postmaster general.
Right.
And we're getting her hooked up, and now we have a little gear store which we can create things and send them out to the world.
My place is already the camera store, and having the camera and the gear was a little. The
It's
walls
really good.
started closing.
They started to close in a little bit, so Jessica may have that problem, but
eventually we got a
for
storage
everyone.
unit. Yeah.
And socks, they're coming, not till this spring, but they're coming.
I told Nate that I like these hats a lot. We should just order more of them right away. What do you think?
I think we're gonna.
They won't come in for.
They won't come in until the spring, but we'll get some more.
That way you just have them on hand.
Yeah. Let's see who is on.
Sam's in there. He's got a 20-mile race in the cold, smushy grounds of Saturday. Nice.
Yeah, guys, if you are just tuning in, say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're calling from.
Very cool.
We got Liz, Shayna, Neil, Carrie, Valerie.
Hey, Troy. Troy's there. I love that we've met
Yeah, we
some
met
of
a
these
bunch
people.
of guys.
Yeah, this is great.
Kelly Olson, how do you get one? Hit that
Hey,
link
Jenna, how's it going?
to get that.
Oh, yeah. So that's good. So what? My training fell off a cliff because I was in South Africa, and I did actually get quite a bit of hiking and or running in, but it's just not the same when I'm. I find that the regularity of like being in a groove here, like once my schedule's honed in, which it usually is when I'm at home, man, taking off both from a nutrition standpoint and from a working out standpoint.
Not the same when you're sitting and running every day.
You know what I noticed? Actually, this is interesting because we talked a lot about sleep. I had the Oura. I just took it off to charge it, but I had the Oura ring on, and obviously my sleep was totally messed up from the
travel
13-hour time difference or whatever it is. And so I was trying to maximize my time there. So that meant instead of sleeping more because I was tired, I was sleeping less because I ended up getting up really early.
And then just try to maximize the day.
The thing that I noticed, I can do with a little sleep, with less sleep, I can kind of.
You're
survive.
better at no sleep than I am.
But
I am.
The thing that really took a hit was that my I think willpower, I found myself choosing to eat the thing that's crappy for my health more, and I really think it was correlated. It was better the first part of the week, and as I ran my body a little harder,
so
I feel like it was really affected by that.
So this is an interesting part about mental toughness.
Yep.
Because I feel like so many things these days, and I'm really excited to ask Alex about this a little bit, is what we habituate ourselves to do, and the best habits we can create are the reason why they're good is because we remove willpower from the equation.
Yep.
But when people have really good nutrition habits, we don't necessarily call them nutritionally tough.
Yeah.
Or when we have good sleep habits, we don't call them sleep tough.
Yeah.
Right. But we have this mental toughness.
Yep.
So is mental toughness the person who's just really organized and has good mental habits? Or are they the person who is good at digging deep on the willpower standpoint when they're exhausted?
That's funny. I think of mental toughness as the being able to really pull it together like a Herculean effort at one at a time. I think the structure. I don't think mental toughness really, for me, the way I think about that term doesn't apply to the habitual stuff because eventually we all crumble under enough time and pressure. Right. And so to get into a really good habit, I feel, is a combination of initial toughness but with a plan.
So here's the next thing. How do you get good at not crumbling under higher stress situations? Because there's an habituation to that, right? Like with
I would like to ask
training,
Alex that.
and this is what's interesting. I was going down this rabbit hole, guys. There's this thing because it's okay, if I'm going to be constantly exposing myself, if I don't do any hard efforts and then I throw myself in the fire in a race,
right?
I'm going to pull my hand out, I'm going to get burned. But if we're doing regular things that are hard, when we get into that race situation and it's the same feeling, you're like, oh, this is familiar territory.
Right. So
am I being mentally tough there, or am I just well practiced and habituated?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can also think of it you move your set point with training, and then mental toughness is that variance. It's a good question. I think I'm just shooting from the hip here, but I definitely was. The first time I ever thought hey, I think about sleep as a necessity.
Yeah.
And then, we are trying to push people and ourselves to think of it as a performance enhancer.
Right.
And then to think of it as like your battery for willpower. This is the first time I really felt like, man,
oh yeah,
I don't have the same, I'm not making the same decisions that I would normally make.
Yeah.
And as the 2 weeks wore on, and I kind of like, I never caught up on my sleep. I just had like less and less and less and less. And I was looking at the Oura ring, and I'm like, man, the last like 4 or 5 nights I had less than 4.5 hours of sleep.
My goodness.
So like, yeah, just kind of like just not sleeping, and because there's always something else to do. And yeah.
You guys, how much sleep do you get? It'd be interesting to see if anyone wants to share. Just drop in the comments. Everyone's different. We're not. There's no judging here. We're just kind of curious, just to see. Maybe
unless it's Nate
judging
me, that happens. But other than that,
that's you understand. That's just what.
It's just life.
That is my fuel for my days. Oh man. Well. Should we get Mr. Alex
on here?
On the line?
I have a feeling we have a lot to talk about with him.
We really will, so I'm excited to get him on a little early.
Guys, as we get started here, first of all, definitely bump us in with your questions, because we're going to be talking, and like we always discuss back and forth with our guests, but hit us down in the comments for questions, and you want to turn off our little air filter there?
Yeah.
That way we don't have a... Guys, when I left, San Francisco was a smoky barbecue of a city, and now it's back in blue and bright and wonderful.
Yeah, it is a lot nicer now these days.
Okay.
So Craig is going to be calling the person, Mr. Alex. You got my...
It's right here.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
You're
got you covered.
Getting in
and
here.
I'm going to call up Alex. Let's see if we can get him on the line.
And meanwhile, we got a few of you guys chiming in. A rival runner says 6 to 7 hours, and that's thanks to my Whoop band. That's pretty cool. So it sounds like you got a little bit more sleep. Jeff Wiley says normal schedule is 5 to 6.
Do you mean this Whoop band?
Oh.
Yeah, this is just these guys are shut out. Everybody on Matt's team uses this.
That's really cool.
In South Africa, but this is kind of like the Oura ring. It measures your sleep and your activity. It's great.
Yeah, look at all these guys. Zacchaeus says 6 to 7. Liz says 6 to 7. Tanya Moore, always 6 hours plus some minutes, but never 7, even on my days off. If I can get closer to, if I can stay north of 7, I feel like a superhero.
You're happy monkey.
7 and 8, I can just go. I can survive under 7, but I don't love it.
Yeah. All right, let's get Alex on here.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Hey.
There he is. All right. Let's say something, Alex. We can see if we can hear you.
Can you guys see me?
Fantastic. All right, we are good to go.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you heard the kind of intro 10 minutes, but we were just talking about how Nate met you when we were in New York, and super great to have you on the show.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I did listen to the intro. I'm excited to get into it, and I won't be offended if Craig falls asleep, given what he's been going through.
Yeah. My goal is to get to like 2 p.m. today, and I told Nate like after 2 p.m. I'm just gonna succumb to it. I can already feel it. Like you start to feel these like weird feelings of like, why am I so tired? It's bright out. Yeah.
You don't have your normal fire and pep.
Well,
which might mean
I
you
think
won't be interrupted as much,
yeah.
which actually might go for a better interview. So hopefully.
There you go. So do you want to introduce Alex in a more full way, or do you want to let him?
Yeah. So I think, for those of you guys who don't know who Alex is, you may have read his column over at Runner's World, a sweat science blog. Oh, our dog is yipping in her sleep behind me in the corner.
What is that?
What is that sound?
She's having a very intense dream.
Nora.
Yeah.
And has now had this column moved over to Outside Magazine. And how long were you at Runner's World, Alex?
About 5 years, 5.5 years, 2012 to 2017 I was at Runner's World. And the blog was actually in existence for maybe 3 or 4 years before that, just as a WordPress blog, just out in the wild.
Yeah, that was always one of my favorite parts of Runner's World, was your blog. I have to ask, and this is kind of a way of introduction, and we can start talking. When people choose, Twitter handles, a lot of times they choose their name, but you chose not your name, and then you came up with Sweat Science. So I'd love to hear the story behind your choice there and how you chose Sweat Science of all things.
Yeah, I mean, I may be cursing this in like 5 years when I want to start writing about, the habitats of butterflies or something like that. And
right.
People are like, why is this guy Sweat Science writing about butterflies? But yeah, for me, it was actually, it was all part of a grand strategic plan about 10 years ago. So I wrote my previous book, which came out in 2011, was a pretty straightforward science of fitness guide.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, the title was maybe a bit of a mishap. It wasn't my choice. It was, so actually, this part of the story I wanted to call the book Sweat Science, with a subtitle of like fitness myths, training truths, and other surprising discoveries from the science of exercise or something. So
sure.
I thought, being trying to be a tactical thinker, I started up a Twitter handle and a blog called Sweat Science 2 years before the book came out, trying to sort of build an audience and establish that reputation. And then once I wrote the book, the publishers were like, nah, Sweat Science is a terrible title. We're going to call it Which Comes First, Cardio or Weights, which, you be the judge. I won't make any value judgments there. But by then I'd already sort of invested all this time in the handle Sweat Science, so I made it into my sort of blog identity. But
Gotcha.
The Twitter handle was definitely a professional choice, and I've become a little more like sharing myself on the social media, but at the time I was like, it's going to be nothing but work. There's going to be nothing but, links to articles, no photos of myself or anything like that.
Well, I mean, it could be worse. Your Twitter handle could be Which Comes First.
At that point, then it's like, let's start this again, and Alex Hutchinson 426_3 or whatever.
At Cardio or Weights, I liked your post.
Yeah. So, Alex, when did you join Twitter? And, because when did Twitter come out?
2003, 2004?
What? No. That early?
Something like that. I remember when it launched.
Oh my gosh. I don't even remember that.
It was something like that. 2004.
Yeah.
I remember where I was when my friend brought it up.
2008.
I remember what house I was in. No. It was like
this guy, Mr. Tech Insider over here.
Yeah.
No big deal.
You get a lot of badges for that.
I just checked my profile. It says I joined in March 2009.
Wow.
It was relatively. I remember around that time there were jokes like, because 140 characters seemed like just such a joke. And then there were these spoof videos of like the next stage of like Flutter or something. It was going to be like you only get 10 characters because then you really get to the point quickly.
But that seems to be like a good platform for you. You're on it pretty regularly. I was just cruising your feed yesterday in preparation for today, and you're like, this seems like a good fit. Like, has that been a good place for you in terms of writing, putting out your message, connecting with other people out there?
100%. To my surprise too, I started with a lot of sort of native skepticism to any form of social media, and I have like a Facebook page too, but Twitter has turned out to be the right fit for me. Again, to my surprise, I started out thinking of it as a sort of broadcast medium where I write an article, I post a link to my article, people read it, and of course that's not really the way social media works. But what I've found is that, first of all, it is interesting to have the conversations with this whole community of people who are interested in the same topics, and to get feedback on articles, which in general I've been lucky that I think, I write about the science of fitness, and I guess I don't attract necessarily a bunch of crazy people. I seem to interact with people who are interested and interesting and have perspectives that I want to share. But it also it's been an amazing medium to get in touch with like scientists, with people who I would otherwise be hoping to interview. And it's great when you interview someone. You if you go through the trouble of making that call and talking to someone, you get a lot of thoughts. But I can't just wake up every morning and interview 20 scientists to see what's cooking in the world of exercise science. But I can go on Twitter. I can see what they're talking about, and very, very often now articles that I read about are ones that I've seen some big figure in the world of exercise or several people in the world of exercise science discussing on Twitter. And if I have questions, I see what the critiques are, and I can just shoot a tweet and say, do you really think that, or how does that work? And they'll reply in a way that's much more fluid and easy than if I had to set up an interview or something to try and find out this minor point. So it's been great despite my initial hesitance, and despite the fact that I feel like the center of gravity is moving over to Instagram these days, which is, I think, a less good fit for what I want to use social media for. But at a certain point, you have to go where the people are. So actually, I set up a Twitter account, last week. I haven't done anything with it, but it's like
an Instagram account.
Well, I'm a decade too late to get like sweat science. So it was like, what am I going to do? Like the sweat science or doc?
Which comes first? I'm sure it's still available.
That one's still available and will be for the next 100 years. But, Twitter is where it's at for me. But it is interesting to see how Instagram has kind of become a big thing.
So to dig into your latest book actually, and your maybe it's good if he gives us that initial story for the book. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I wanted to hit a few angles on and talk about your book Endure and some of the stories that stood out for you. The story that Craig is alluding to is your breaking of the 4 minutes in the 1500 meter. Why don't we start there?
Yeah. Why don't you just give us the quick version of that story, and then we can kind of dig in. That way, give people a little bit of context for the book.
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of my origin story. I wrote this book where the fundamental question is what defines our limits, and where I explore the mind's role. And so I had to at a certain point I had to sit down and think about, why am I so obsessed with this? Why do I think this is interesting? And it ended up I ended up sort of tracing it back to, as you said, one specific race I had when I was a college student on the track team, trying to break 4 minutes for the 1500, which, just for context for people, that's like a 418 mile or so. So it's like a sort of poor man's 4 minute mile barrier. And the backstory is that I thought I was going to run sub 4 very easily. I ran 4:02 in high school in my second year of running. But then I hit a total plateau. I ran 4:01 or 4:02 for 4 years in a row. And I think, so that's my concept of physical limits is well, I guess this is what my body's capable of. I'm training pretty hard, and year after year I'm running 4:01 or 4:02. And I just hoped that I could squeeze out a 3:59 before I finished my career. And what ended up happening, just to cut to the chase, is I ran this race where the timekeeper was giving the wrong splits. So it was an indoor race, so every 200 meters the timekeeper calling out your splits. And I went through the first lap, and he called out 27 seconds, and that's way too fast for a 4 minute 1500. And so I had this sort of split between holy crap, you are doomed, you idiot, and that feels really good. And that this went on. The second lap was 57, which is again way too fast, and I still felt good. Third lap, fast, felt good. And at that point I just kind of shut down and stopped listening to the splits and just figured, this is the day of your life, Alex. Don't waste it, just run. And I ended up running 3:52, which was
crazy.
A 9-second personal best. So
when you've been stuck for years, when you've been stuck for years at 4:142, all of a sudden you just have
every
this
time I tell
crazy
the story,
shift.
People, afterwards, they're asking okay, but what else did you change in your training? There must be something else there, and I'm sure there were other factors, right? Life is always complicated. It's never as simple as it maybe seems in a 30-second story. But that is really what happened. That's really what happened. And after that, I never had trouble breaking 4 minutes again. It was this total change because I was effectively kind of tricked into thinking I was having the greatest day of my life.
Yeah. Wow.
It's such a neat entry point. And you did this, and then you got into running a little bit faster, and you started running. What's your best in the 1500 meters? Is it 3:45 or 44?
So that year I ran 3:44. The next year I ran 3:42, and then I got hurt the year after that, and that ended up being my 3. So 3:42 is as fast as I got. And if you look it up,
it's still a 20-second PR, a 20-second difference from when you thought you plateaued.
It's a total mental I had trouble feeling like I belonged in the races I then got into, because I'd be hang on, I was usually in that totally other different meet, and now I'm racing against these guys who I have posters of on my wall at home. It was
wow. Now there's Alex, there's two things that I've picked up from you. One is this: you have this innate curiosity. There might have been other runners who would have had a similar thing happen to them, but they just would have shrugged and I'm faster, cool, and that's it. But for you, this is a story that stuck with you. And then I know that you are very meticulous with your your note taking and your writing. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is did you know that you were going to become a writer at this point when you were running? And if you had become a better runner, right? Like if you had, quote unquote, not that you're an incredible runner, not to say you didn't make it, right? But if you actually had made the Olympic team, would you have written this book?
So that's a really interesting question. And I would almost put it the other way around, is that if I wasn't the kind of person, the questioning, meticulous, skeptical, analytical, over-analytical person that I am, maybe I would have made the Olympic team. This is something I wonder about a lot. Maybe because I'm not sure that being the form of questioning that I do as a journalist, I'm not sure it's actually the optimal thing you want to do if you want to perform at your best. There's a time for questioning, and there's a time to have. And I don't want to say that never ask why, or you're never gonna do your personal best. But I think so. My temperament, my personality, is I think well suited to being a science journalist. It's not necessarily as well suited to being, an elite athlete, where confidence, and we'll probably get into some of this, confidence and mindset plays such an important role, and doubt is a little bit kind of the enemy sometimes.
Yeah.
And for me, this really came into focus. I spent a couple years in my mid-20s training with a coach named Matt Centrowitz, who's the father of Matt Johnson was senior, who's the father of the 2016 Olympic 1500 meter champion. And he's a really, really interesting guy, former American record holder for 5,000 meters, but also the prototype of the old school intuitive coach. He didn't give you such and such a workout because he'd calculated that your VO2 max would be optimized by hitting this energy system. He gave you that workout because it felt right, and if he would change it partway through, and next week he'd be doing something totally different. And when I was there, he was coaching at American University, and he had some amazing runners who were qualifying for the NCAAs and doing very well. And one of the hallmarks for those guys is that whatever coach said, they did, and they didn't question it. Whereas I was always like, what do you mean? Why are we doing this? Last week we did the opposite. And there were never good answers. And I would ask these other guys, how can you go out and do this week when last week he yelled at you for doing exactly this? And they'd say, we don't worry about it. Coach is very successful. We're going to do what he says. We know he'll get us to the right place at the right time.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that's brilliant. I wish I could be just a little more calm and less skeptical about it. So anyway, that's a long way to answer the question. But I mean,
it's true.
It's my personality, and I'm not sure it's a gift athletically, but it's been good journalistically.
The discerning mind is usually, they say this about like investors versus entrepreneurs. Like if you're an entrepreneur, you need to just go for the goal and not think about all the things that can go wrong because there's way too many of them. Where if you're investing, you need to have a discerning mind.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about it. Maybe the discerning mind is the coach's job. But from an athletic standpoint, it's better to just follow.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That is interesting. Because if you're an entrepreneur, there's always a lot of good reasons that what you're planning is going to fail.
Right.
It's the same reason if you're same thing if you're an athlete. Like if you're trying to do something that's really hard, that's the edge of your abilities. The rational thing to do when you analyze it is to realize this isn't going to work. There's no way it's going to happen, and you have to be able to quiet those voices. Not to say that you shouldn't be self-questioning and analytical about what you're doing, but I think there's a sweet spot that can be somewhere in the middle maybe.
Yeah. I have my own quick story on the interplay of the mind with physical limits in my own training. I was a triathlete, and I was a okay to very good amateur athlete on the edge of racing at the dredges of the professional field.
Yeah.
And I was always trying to improve my cycling. I invested in a power meter, and I was someone who was just more analytical and obsessed versus trusting and fluid. And so I would just stare at my numbers and make sure it's a certain wattage. And if I was riding with someone and they spiked their wattage at all, I I was the least fun person to ride with for forever. And I was stuck and convinced that my wattage for a half Ironman would be 255 watts is what I could hold for 2.5 hours. And I was always stuck there. And anytime I saw the number go over 255, I'd freak out in a race. If it was a hill or anything, it's I can't do this. And one day my coach looked at me and he took a piece of black electrical tape and he put it on top of my power meter. So I couldn't see the numbers, and he did it like right before the start of the race, and I was like, oh my God, I can't see the numbers. What am I gonna do? And that day, my previous, I think, PR on a half Ironman bike, which is a 56-mile part leg of the triathlon, was maybe just under 230. And that day, with a piece of black electrical tape over, I rode an average 285 watts and biked a 219 split.
Wow.
And didn't blow up on the run. Yeah. I was stunned. Yeah.
The sort of analogous coach interaction I had with Centro, again, this coach. So we would do workouts, and he would give us very specific, like, I want you to run these mile reps in 424 or whatever. And if it was my turn to lead a rep, I would be really stressed, because if you screwed up the pace, he would yell at you. So I would check. It's 400-meter laps. I would check at 200 to make sure I was on pace. And then I was like, that's not good enough, because if you screw up by 200, it's too late. So I got to the point where I would check my watch. I knew this. I knew the markers for 100, 200, 300, 400, wow. And then 600, 800. And it was ridiculous. Wow. It was like a joke. And so Central would catch me looking at my watch, and he'd, in the middle of an interval, he'd say, "Take off your goddamn watch and throw it in the infield." So I'd be running along as hard as I could, and I'd have to strip off my watch and throw it in the infield. And then it was like you're saying, total panic. I'd be like, I don't know, how can I run without my watch on?
Yeah.
I don't take my watch off for anything.
Oh my God.
But that's kind of, so, this whole question of like, once you know the power you can sustain for a race, does it become a limiter rather than a spur?
Right.
And the answer is, I think it really depends on the person and the context. And there are people, so for me, because of who I am, I really see the dangers. Because I was a guy who, in the mid-90s, was waking up in the morning, taking my resting heart rate before I stood up, then standing up, counting 10 seconds, taking my heart rate again, plotting the difference between those two heart rates, because it was supposed to be an early indicator of overtraining, in like Lotus 1, 2, 3. I love data. Like that's my kryptonite. And so now that we have these wearables that can produce like a billion types of data, I recognize it as a danger for me. So I run with an old Timex Ironman. I keep no data. Now other people, they might be the total opposite. They might be the type who slacks off or who doesn't keep track of what they're doing, and the data is a godsend. So it's not good or bad, but you have to sort of recognize what your weaknesses or predilections are.
So that's a great kind of segue into my next question, which is your journey in your own career as a writer and as an athlete, and also specifically shadowing the Breaking 2 project. How do you feel like they use data for good, and where were the limits of that?
Just to rewind, I don't know if we really detailed what your newest book is about, and then again about the
actually let's do that, and also rewind a little, and you guys can get an autographed copy of this.
That's right. So we didn't even mention this yet, but as you regulars know, there's a Gleam link right down below in the description of this video, and you can both check out all of Alex's stuff and his social media, so you can follow him there.
Subscribe to his Twitter page.
Yeah, his Twitter page. And follow on Twitter.
Subscribe.
And
I do YouTube, man. I don't do the Twitter, so I don't even know what that is.
And then you can actually sign up to get a free autographed copy of his book. We also have a link to buy his book off Amazon for like that as well.
Yeah. So where was I going?
So first of all, just give us what is the 3-sentence synopsis of the book, Endure, and why do people want to pick it up?
Yeah. So the book tries to answer the question: what defines your limits at that point where you have pushed absolutely as hard as you can? You can't go any farther, any faster. What's holding you back? And the sort of the Coles Notes version of the conclusion is that in almost every case, limits that feel physical to us are at least influenced by the brain. Maybe not controlled by the brain, but they're influenced by the brain. That it's the brain and the body together as a system that define your limits. And so what I'll say is that if you pick up the book, it's not going to magically, there's not a whole lot of secrets that suddenly you're going to be able to run twice as fast. It's a more of a curiosity-driven approach to try and understand where those limits come from and how they manifest in different contexts, whether it's a hot day or at altitude or if you're dehydrated, or what role does pain play or muscle play. So it's an attempt to explore all these different things that we think of as limiters and figure out where the brain comes in to affect them.
Yeah. I loved your definition for endurance. Do you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started out assuming that my definition of endurance would be like, the percentage of your VO2 max that you can sustain for blah, blah, blah. The definition I ended up with was that endurance is the struggle to continue against a mounting desire to stop. And I didn't make that up. That comes directly from scientific papers. So it's a very general definition of endurance. And the sort of interesting thing to me is that it applies as much to like studying for an exam or, and all sorts of other contexts, or staying awake for an interview just after you fly back from South Africa or whatever, as it does to running a marathon. And it's not just a sort of metaphor. That what the scientists are saying is that it's the same thing. Endurance is a struggle against your perception of difficulty, not a sort of physiological, how much lactic acid can your muscle fibers handle or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of endurance, I think it also is like it's a personal thing, right? I people who have run for a long time have a different idea of what that feeling is like compared to people who are stepping into the line for the first time. I think one of the things that we see with beginner runners is that they're, if they haven't had an athletic experience, that they're experiencing like their body go through these like feelings and changes for the first time, and it can be somewhat alarming. Like, what's the difference? Somebody's saying, the rival runner here is saying, when you decide to pull back on a training date and get more rest, is it based on feel or data? And that's a question that we all face at some point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one thing I would say is, let's say someone decides to take up running for the first time, and they're going to run a 5K in 6 months, and they start first a run walk program and then running more and more. We all kind of understand the changes that go on in their body, that their heart's getting stronger, their muscles are getting more efficient. All these things are happening. I don't think we necessarily think as much or realize how much is changing in the mind too. That exactly like you said, when you start running for the first time and you start panting, you're totally out of breath and your legs are burning. The perception is that you're experiencing some physical crisis and that you're going to die if you don't slow down soon.
Yeah.
And what you realize 6 months later, the same person understands that or experiences that as just like, this is what running feels like when I'm pushing hard, and I can sustain it. I can't sustain it forever, but I can.
Right.
I can be in this sort of state of discomfort for 15 minutes without any negative repercussions, and then later they'll learn that it's 20 minutes
really interesting.
and 25 minutes. So there's a mental change too as you become accustomed to that struggle. So the same level of struggle you can tolerate greater amounts of discomfort as you get.
That is so interesting to hear you say that. I ran in college as well and put in a lot of mileage, as I'm sure you did as well during that time period. And I've always found that no matter where how long I've been off of running or, taking a vacation like I just did, I always get in shape much quicker running than I can if I'm on a bike or if I'm swimming or anything else. And I had always thought of it as, kind of the pathways in my body are kind of predisposed toward this one type of exercise, whereas I get on my bike, it's just different, even though it feels somewhat similar. It's just different. And now that you're speaking of it, I realize that like I can push myself running mentally way easier, no matter what my like kind of cardiovascular thing. And it's interesting to think of about that. That difference might be more of a mental thing than a physical thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some truth to the idea that your body is uniquely suited to what you've done most of. But I definitely think, for me, it's like, I know I can suffer more in running because I've felt that specific form of suffering so many times, and I'm much more of a wimp if in cycling, because I don't know the fatigue is a little bit different, the muscles used are a little bit different, and so I'm not as confident that I'm not going to just like keel over 80% of the way through and not make it back.
So this is kind of touching on mental toughness, and we were talking about that a little bit in the first few minutes. Alex, this is something I've been noodling on a little bit, just with some athletes I've worked with. The CIM marathon was over the past weekend. I had some friends and athletes who did fantastic, and some others who were soul-crushingly, disappointed.
Yep.
And
at CIM?
Yeah. And it brings up at every race, but you kind of see athletes struggling at different areas, right? There's like the pre-race jitters, the bad race situation. There's the I'm injured, I'm stuck inside a recess and everyone else is playing thing. And then there's the pain tolerance.
Right.
And I just wanted you to like maybe share like how you think about mental toughness, especially given your expanded understanding on how the brain and body connects.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so in some ways, I think some of mental toughness is kind of contextual in that, it's sort of like when we talk about willpower, and we like to think of it as it's just like, how tough are you? But in fact, it's often strongly influenced by the context. And if you've been up, if you haven't been getting enough sleep, just as you might find yourself reaching for the Cheetos more often, you're also more likely to back off in a race. And if so your confidence, your familiarity, all these sorts of things, you may, one person may seem more mentally tough than another, or you may seem more mentally tough than you did 2 weeks ago, not because your character has changed or anything like that, but because you're just in a better state.
You've slept better, you're not as stressed, you're all these things.
Have you read much? There's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah. A great
He
book.
talks about that a little bit. Yeah, he talks a little bit about this as well.
Yeah, actually, so in my book, I was gonna put in a little section, about endurance in the context of like Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and System 2. And it ended up being a bit too much of a digression, but I think you can definitely think of it that way. Like Kahneman talks about, there's System 1, which is these automatic, quick reactions that are good for making quick decisions and responding to intuitions. And System 2 is this more effortful sort of overriding, but making the rational decision instead of just using a sort of shortcut to decide. And it's very much like System 1, when you're running, System 1 wants you to slow down. Because that's the that's the rational thing to do on any number of levels, except for this higher level that you want to do well in the race. So System 2 is you're sort of rationally calculating that, man, I'm going to be so proud of myself if I achieve this goal and if I can override this instinct to stop. So there's this constant battle between the two, and one of the lessons from Kahneman's and other people's work is that there are all these other things that can influence how System 1 is operating without you realizing it. So all of a sudden it will seem sort of powerfully logical to slow down or to stop. And that's not necessarily because you're weak. It's just that your brain is making different calculations based on the context, based on what the competitive stakes, based on whether you think you're going to be successful.
Yeah. I found that template that he made between System 1 and System 2 super interesting. There was also, I remember, a piece of research from his book around the kind of the battery that we think of as being emotional, physical, and mental is all the same battery. So they did some tests where, if you squeezed on this grip strength and tired yourself out that way, plus did some like math problems, then you were more likely to have an emotional response to an emotional story, or the other way around too. If you have an emotional response to a movie, you can't squeeze on the grip as hard because it's taxing the same system, which is fascinating.
This is a beautiful segue to one of my favorite studies, one of my favorite, most disgusting studies. So here's the situation. You get a bunch of people. They all have to watch a video of a woman making herself vomit and then eating the vomit. So really disgusting thing. You like where I'm going with this, right? So, some of the people are instructed to watch the video and just watch it. And then when they're done watching it, they go and do like an endurance test on the bike.
Okay.
But some people and some people don't watch it at all and do the endurance test. And some people do the endurance, watch the video, but they're instructed they have to keep a poker face. If you feel disgusted, don't show your emotions. Just suppress your emotions. Watch the video. Don't show disgust. Then get on the bike and do it. And what they found is a significant decrease in performance for the people who had to regulate their emotions. So they're doing this emotional regulation, which is something we all go through, like to various levels throughout day-to-day life. Is not telling people what you really think of them, but that is fatiguing enough in a way that then you get on the bike and all of a sudden your endurance is less. So that I think is a beautiful illustration of how all these things are tied together. And the same with cognitive fatigue. If you're working hard at a computer, there's a bunch of research in recent years that shows that fatigue hurts physical performance. So when you taper for a race, you have to reduce your training, but you also should not use that extra time to go do your taxes.
Right. You should be reducing cognitive.
Maybe this is why I'm feeling tired. I've been hanging around you all morning. I haven't been able to tell you what I really think.
Dude, you see these gray hairs and fucking bags on your last couple of years? Get out of here.
I think that type of research, it doesn't really filter into, we don't really see that filtering into the kind of common lore around what to do for performance, though. I mean, this is still stuff that's stuck in like academia and research mode, if you ask me. It's very rare that I see this type of thing kind of come out into people's training on a like maybe even on an elite level, but not on an average level.
Yeah, and like to that end, like where do you find when people are like, oh, pain is weakness leaving the body, like suck it up, like do you find is that helpful at all anymore? Should we totally throw that away as runners?
You know what, I think there's value to suffering. I mean, I think and I think you were alluding to this before, that you get good at dealing with discomfort by dealing with discomfort.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean every day should be uncomfortable.
Right.
But, depending on the time of year or whatever, but a couple times a week or something, you need to be pushing yourself in a way that goes beyond just like, am I triggering the growth of new capillaries in my muscles? And also like, am I getting ready to handle the discomfort? And then a couple times a season or something, you need like, you don't want your first race to be your most important race. You want to experience the really, really hard effort now and then. And there's really interesting research on like pain tolerance and pain sensitivity, which first of all, what it shows is that if you compare athletes and non-athletes, there's no difference in how they perceive pain. Like the threshold at which they say, yeah, this hurts, when you're giving them, gradually escalating shocks or whatever, they both say, yeah, that hurts at the same point. So athletes, it's not like they don't feel pain. They feel the same pain. They're just willing to tolerate it for longer, which suggests that it's psychological coping strategies are probably the main thing. That it's just they've learned to distract themselves. They've learned to sort of take away the emotional response and just say, this is information, it hurts, but get away from that panic. And the second thing that's interesting about the pain research is that even with elite athletes, if you look at them at different times of year, their pain tolerance rises and falls. So their greatest pain tolerance is right before a big race. And I'm thinking of a study here that was on Scottish national team swimmers. So people who've been training at an elite level for a decade, then in their off season is when their pain tolerance is lowest. So it's not like you learn it once and that's it. It's like, okay, now I know how to suffer. You have to relearn it every time, and you have to be suffering a little bit in training. It doesn't mean you suffer just for the sake of suffering. It's not like go bang your head against the wall because it's going to make you better. But as part of training, it can't be too easy. If it's easy, you're not going to be ready to really push yourself to the limits in racing.
Huh. That is really incredible. I've often thought about the whole interplay between emotions and physicality and just mental cognition of like, what's the impact of me training hard in the morning for the rest of my day versus training hard in the evening? Like, depending on what my focus for the day is it really my training, in which case maybe that's a good idea, or is it my work, in which case is that being affected by the fact that I just did a 10-mile hard in the morning?
I do think, I think there's a lot of variables there in terms of how people fit things into their lives and what their chronotype is and when they feel good. But I know for me, it's like, whatever's most important to me, I need to do it first because I'm going to give the best of myself. And so, although these days I almost always run in the morning and then go to work, even though my work is now more important to me than my running. But I'm no longer training so hard that it leaves me, like in the olden days, after a workout, it'd be like, okay, now I'm going to go sort of lie on the floor for the rest of the day, and that would be productive. And
So why do you think, bigger picture, that it's important that we test our limits at all, or that we even know where they are? I just listened to the Outside Sweat Science podcast, and guys, if you don't know, Alex, you've got a new little project going on over there, which is great. And it talked about these guys who are trying to break the pull-up world record in 24 hours. Whoa. Would you hazard a guess at what the current pull-up world record is, Mr. Craig.
Meaning like how many pull-ups you can do in 24 hours?
Yes, non-kipping, strict.
Oh my God, I don't even want to think about that. Over 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the official record is like something like 7,600. And the unofficial record is this kid who did 10,000.
In a day?
In a day. And he averaged, it was like 6 push-ups or 6 pull-ups every 30 seconds for like, and he didn't even go all 24 hours, he went for like 20. But I bring this up because when you're like,
what?
Who would do this? That is dumb. But my also thinking was like, is that any dumber than running 50 miles or 100 miles or arbitrarily pushing yourself on a marathon?
Yeah.
And it's like, we are hardwired, and this is what's interesting to me, our brain is hardwired not to protect ourselves. Right? We've done a really good job in a society to protect ourselves, right? Like, we have engineered all inconvenience out of our lives. I step out of the curb, there's an Uber. I don't even have to walk in an airport anymore, right? There's just like moving sidewalks as I go through. And yet, we have had this urge to re-engineer all of this hard stuff back into our lives.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I never thought about it that way.
Huh. So Alex, what do you see? Like, what drives people to do this crazy stuff?
That's a great question. I'm not going to pretend I have a good answer, and I will say, like, you started by saying, do we need to, like, what do we get out of it? And I would say, I don't know that I think everyone needs to find some sort of physical challenge to push themselves to their limit. I think that's one path to sort of finding a way in life. And so if someone decides they want to be the greatest concert pianist they can be, or that doesn't necessarily involve pushing physical limits in the same way, but it involves trying to maybe it does. It's not physical limits, but it's pushing back it's getting deeply engaged with something that I think that is the fundamental thing. It's not so much.
It's like discovery, mastery. There's all these components in place.
Yeah.
It gives us purpose and drive. It's one of those crazy things.
Yeah, I mean, maybe woodworking is your hobby, but I just think that I think a mastery is probably a more important pursuit than discovering a physical limit. And I think the pursuit of our physical limits for runners and other endurance athletes is one way of it happens to be a really convenient and sort of easy to conceive or to conceptualize way of pursuing mastery. So I think it's a great one, and I think it's interesting. But I think the fundamental thing is, like you said, getting really deeply engaged with something and seeing how good you can become, rather than necessarily something innate in having to push your physical limits.
So we have a question here from one of our guests around like what does a person do to train for mental toughness, and that kind of dovetails with the question I had for you, which is you spend all this time digging into these stories of endurance, and then what is elasticity, what are the elements of it? How is this kind of translated into your own life? Like what has changed for you after the process of writing the book?
So the biggest change for me is that I know what I should be doing, not so much that I am doing it.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, so a great example is mindfulness. I'm like one of 10 billion people who now think, hey, wow, there's some really pretty good evidence that mindfulness can have a really big impact in your life. Now that I'm aware of that, I'm going to continue being aware of it. And I'm going to,
being aware is the first step.
Exactly. And
maybe the last step.
Step one is a nice place to be. No, but it's so in terms of how to train for mental toughness or how to train to push your limits, I think that there's less sort of radical new stuff than you might think. I mean, I wrote about and tried out stuff like electrical brain stimulation, and there's all sorts of new kinds of things. But I think the fundamentals are actually like do hard stuff. And for me, one of the sort of in a concrete way, the probably the best advice that I came across, or at least the most, put it this way, the idea with the best research, because there's a lot of people who have great experiential ways of talking about how to push limits, and probably they're right in some ways, and some of them are right and some of them are wrong. And so my question is always like, how do we know who's who? How do we know who are the geniuses and who are the charlatans? It's very hard to tell. So then my question is, well, which approaches have evidence? Not that the other approaches don't work, but it's just that the ones that have evidence we can be more confident about.
Right.
And so a technique called motivational self-talk is one that I think where the evidence has gotten quite strong. It's been around for a long time. I was given that advice by sports psychologists. We had a sports psychologist with our track team back in the 90s trying to teach us motivational self-talk, who we totally ignored because we thought it was a bunch of crap. But now there's some pretty good research, and the idea here, it's really simple. It's basically just become aware of what your internal monologue is. We all have internal monologues that are running through our minds, particularly in races. And if you're like me, that internal monologue is along the lines of, this sport is really stupid. Why do I do this? I hate this. This sucks. I'm gonna fail. I should drop out. Where's the nearest subway stop? That's not helpful. It affects when we talk about limits as a sort of sum of how we're feeling, both the physical and the mental and emotional. That's a drag on our assessment of whether we can keep going and maintaining that pace.
Right.
So if you can alter the words in your head, if you can be telling yourself, I've trained for this. This is what I'm here for. I can do this. What the research has shown is that this will actually alter your perception of effort. So if you're cycling at a given power output, you've had a couple weeks of training in motivational self-talk, you'll be like, yeah, this is a 6 out of 10 instead of this is a 7 out of 10. And that means you can go farther, you can go faster, you can perform better in a time trial. So it's not enough to just decide to do that. But, back to what we were saying about knowing is only half the battle. You have to practice it enough so that it becomes automatic. You practice it in training. You have to find phrases that work for you that don't sound ridiculous to you, because it's always a difficult fight against stuff that sounds totally cliched or sort of hackneyed.
Yeah. And the studies there show that it is actually the training beforehand rather than doing this the day of the race that is the key.
Well, the study design probably doesn't make it possible to answer that entirely, but the way they do it is they usually give people, a couple hours of training in the concepts, and then give them some workbooks to work with, and then they have them practice it in training for a week or 2 weeks. Then they come back and do it. Maybe some people would be able to just do it just by being told, but the problem is that, in a race, your mind is not necessarily right. It's very hard to control your thoughts from scratch while you're also trying to push yourself as hard as you can. So you want it to be sort of instinctive that the thoughts come. If you're having to put in the extra mental effort to try and control your thoughts, that's an extra burden on you in the middle of the race.
Gotcha. Well, I'm just looking at the time here. I just read.
I know we're getting all the way to the end.
We could talk for another hour easily, which means that we should probably have you back on.
Yeah.
But so first of all, let's just remind people, if you want to follow Alex and hear about all this check out his blog. First of all, there's a link to that also in the Gleam link down below. So if you look below, there's a Gleam link. It has links to all of his stuff. There's also a link to buy his book right in the description of this video. And of course, you can find him on Twitter, and you can find his book on Amazon. Is it 3 books now?
Three books, but I'm recommending the 2, and particularly the last one. I've gotten better as time goes on.
That's awesome. And of course, we'd love to have you back on. Thank you so much for all of your time, Alex.
Yeah.
It's been great. Really appreciate you kind of stepping out in the middle of your day to hang out with us.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't get to the questions in the comments section, but I really appreciate the interest.
We would absolutely love to have a part 2 to this. There's way more to talk about, and we have we'll definitely we'll send out some more books to our members and schedule time for next time.
Yeah, and speaking of, are there more books in the future? Can we expect,
If I want to pay the rent,
I got to take a break.
In the future, I know. I'll need to come up with something. But the truth is, right now, I have zero idea. Like I'm trying to figure out. I want to make sure that it's something I'm totally psyched to spend a few years on, and I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I hear you there.
Great. Well, thanks again, Alex, and we'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye. Let's see if we can pop back.
Here we go. Going back to the main screen. We've got to hit the transition button.
There you go. All right. Guys, it has been it's been great having you for here on this hour. I know it's always so short when we have people on. I feel like we need to get them on as soon as, because we never have quite enough time to ask all the questions. But thanks again for guys for tuning in. We'll be here next week.
Yeah.
Same bat time. And then hit that Gleam link down below. We're not doing the drawing until next week. So all you guys that are listening into this or watching this,
we do have a
we get to
Earn Your
beanie.
Miles
All right,
winner
fantastic.
beanie. We're giving away one of these guys. So I've got it up. And drawing the winner as we speak. Here we go. Deborah Barnes from Mandeville, LA. Is that Louisiana?
Yep, Louisiana. All right.
Deborah Barnes, congratulations. You're the winner of
Fantastic.
our winter beanie.
Louisiana is really cold, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. Cold enough.
It's cold enough. Guys, thank you so much for signing on. We'll do the book drawing for Alex's book next week, as I said. Other than that, we will see you guys next week. Oh, wait, here comes the outro. Don't worry. I'm taking care of it.
To do strength. And running will only take you so far. When I did a half marathon this year and I was at 2:07, so I think, and that was just with only running, not doing any other type of like specific running workouts. Like I didn't do any speed work, I just ran. I ran 4 or 5 days a week and just built up my mileage and did that. So now like adding some strength training into it, adding some different types of workouts, I feel like I'll get there. It feels good to run fast. I just need to be able to like sustain it.